Okay, we are streaming live and I'll start the webinar whenever you let me know you're ready, Leah.
All right, is everyone ready?
Yes.
Cool. All right, we can start it, Aisha. Good evening and welcome to our October board meeting. My name is Leah Cruzy, and I am joined this evening by Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Treasurer Chantel Wright, and in a few minutes later this evening, our Secretary Shakura Adama-Fanian. Now that we are halfway through our fall semester, this is an important time to pause and focus on the oversight role of the DC Public Charter School Board. We're generally known as the DC Board that authorizes public charter schools in Washington, DC, but we have another important element of our mission. That is monitoring and evaluating public charter schools. This takes many forms. It includes the actions this board votes on every month, including reviewing and renewing school charters, authorizing new schools, expanding campuses, school accountability, school goals, and much more. We look at public charter school education from both a micro point of view, meaning we look at individual schools, as well as a macro point of view, which includes the overall quality of public education in the district. Importantly, we want to see DC public charter schools to be environments where all students, especially those in historically marginalized groups, thrive. Also important is our relationship with the boards that govern each public charter school. At the core, the agreements we make with the charter school is actually an agreement between this board and the board of each local education agency, or LEA, which may oversee one or more schools. As we move through each agenda item this evening, Aisha and Courtney, our moderators for the evening, will unmute DC PCSB constituents, staff, or individuals speaking on behalf of a school. The hand-raising feature for this evening has been disabled. Individuals who have previously signed up to testify will be called upon. And as a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you didn't sign up by sending your name to the public comment mailbox before this meeting, please submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660 and select option 2. We will hear from one witness this evening who signed up to speak. And for that, I'd like to welcome David Alpert to testify. And David, please keep your comments to 2 minutes.
I see him in the attendee. I keep trying to promote him. I don't know if he's having difficulty. Let me see. It looks like it might have worked this time.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Aisha. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, and good evening. My name is David Alpert, and I am the Ward 2 member of the Student Assignment and Boundary Working Group and parent of a 5th and 1st grader. I am a supporter of an effective charter sector, which educates children and fits in with a big picture education vision for our city. As I've gotten to understand the education landscape and the sectors, I believe we need venues for discussion of that big picture vision in school planning. What are our needs for education, and how can the sectors fill them? How can we expand what is working and improve what is not? The student assignment study is showing a good example of dialogue among educators and advocates across sectors. I believe we need ongoing opportunities for this dialogue, both public and among stakeholders. You, the board, can play an important role. I hope that you can, in fact, foster discussions about the big picture vision for education, and then how to apply that to specific schools. Your strategic roadmap and criteria for new or expanded schools are a good start. I hope they can be fleshed out to prescribe more clearly what we need, where, and how. Upcoming school-specific decisions can then be discussed in relation to those criteria. For instance, it's come up in online forums that Basis PCS would like to add elementary grades. This has not been a public topic yet at the PCSB. However, we know from meeting minutes that PCSB staff have given feedback about things like phasing of grade levels. Clearly, there is discussion happening, probably rightly so, about what PCSB may or may not end up approving. I hope these questions can also be discussed publicly in the planning phase. Otherwise, there's the risk that significant changes like this, which affect many parents either positively or negatively, don't actually come to a broader discussion until a school has already made a financial commitment and the board is expected to approve it. It does make sense for staff to often discuss details in private, but if so, I hope there can be detailed, clear planning principles that did get public discussion first. Ultimately, we need that public discussion to happen at the front end for specific school proposals. Any decision here, or for other schools, for instance, can be factored into things like the Student Assignment Committee's current work. To be clear, I'm neither against nor for Basis's plan. I don't even know the specifics, but any change has an impact on the entire education system, often positive, maybe sometimes not. And we need to plan around the larger impacts of those potential changes, even if they are very positive, or if they're not. I look forward to working with you as you create and refine this vision and work to best serve all children in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alpert, our public comment speaker this evening. And this concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda. Board members, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda for the October 16th, 2023 meeting.
A second.
Thank you. We'll do a quick roll call vote. Jim Sandman?
Aye.
Chantel Wright?
Aye.
And also an aye. We have both a quorum and the ayes have it. So Dr. Walker Davis, I believe I pass it now. Oh, excuse me. Before I pass it on to you, I have some introductions to make. Everybody, this evening, we have Dr. Walker Davis, and joining with us is Carrie Irvin, a senior advisor at Bellwether. And together they will have an important discussion about the DC PCSB's efforts to revise our accountability system. They will share with us the important work that boards of public charter schools do as part of their role and responsibility in their school's academic achievement. I am very much looking forward to this presentation because it involves two leaders who think about improving the quality of education in the district so much. So let me now turn it over to Dr. Walker Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Good evening, members of the board, and welcome, Carrie, for our presentation on the important role that charter school board members have in academic oversight. If you could go to the next slide, please. As this board well knows, and for our viewing public, DC PCSB embarked on this journey to shift our accountability system more than 2 years ago. Revising the accountability system supports our overarching vision that every DC student receives a quality education that makes them feel valued and prepares them for lifelong learning, fulfilling careers, and economic security. And it supports our mission by allowing us to evaluate school performance, placing a greater emphasis on equity and achievement. Next slide, please. Developing and implementing and evaluating schools using accountability plans, frameworks, or a system is not a new practice for DC PCSB. In fact, Chair Cruzy has reminded us about that at multiple previous board meetings. We do, in fact, have a long history of strong accountability here, as you can see from this slide. It is this commitment to lifelong success of students of the District of Columbia that has grounded and informed the changes that we will propose to the board eventually in our new accountability system. Our work to shift the frameworks in the accountability system used to evaluate schools started before the pandemic and actually before I was appointed as executive director. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us that our oversight tools are nimble, but that we also have an opportunity to refine our authorizing practices and re-examine the data that we use for our decision-making that's exclusively for public charter schools. It's important to note that there are other accountability systems, but that this is the only one that evaluates every public charter school in Washington, D.C. on common metrics across student groups. It's our hope that by refining our accountability system, we can hold ourselves as well as public charter schools to a higher standard. Next slide, please. The DC PCSB needs an accountability system to do its work to provide oversight of public charter schools, but it is one of the tools that this board uses to make decisions and that will have public results available associated with it. Moreover, one of the guiding beliefs from our national organization, which is the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, states that frameworks should maintain rigor and hold schools to high standards. You'll see here on that slide both the NACSA guidance as well as our guiding principles. These are the guiding principles that have informed how we developed and designed the frameworks in the accountability system. It's our hope that the system is designed and understood and embraced ultimately in such a way that eventually the majority of our schools will adopt it as its goals, similar to those that have adopted the performance management framework, or what is commonly known as the PMF. Now, I want to just spend a little bit more time talking about the ways that our accountability system will shift. As you well know, our board, we have a current accountability system that has been used for well over 8 years, and I will just point out a few of the differences between that system to what will be proposed in the final technical guide. First, our current system, performance management framework, had 3 tiers. We are making a critical shift in the proposed accountability system to have 5 levels. And this allows an opportunity for us to have greater granularity in the distinction of performance across our portfolio of schools. You will note that in the performance management framework, we had 6 categories. Those were student progress, student achievement, gateway, school environment, college and career readiness, and leading indicators. And we have collapsed those categories into 4 categories, with school progress and school achievement encompassing many of the student progress, student achievement, gateway, and school measures. And then we will continue to have school environment, and unique to our performance framework this year and going forward will be the inclusion of school-specific performance metrics. This is really an opportunity for schools to have specific goals included in the calculation of the framework related to the unique mission and programming of that school. In the past, we have had schools that adopted our performance management framework and added additional metrics associated with their mission. In the new accountability system, these measures will be baked into the overall score that a school receives, and it allows for some differentiation amongst a portfolio of schools that we have to allow for the unique programming that is happening across our 69 LEAs. I'm really excited about this work. We have much to learn about what our schools are already doing to highlight the unique ways that they are doing this work. And most importantly, we have provided a way for that to be baked into the overall score that schools receive so that there are measures in addition to the traditional academic and growth measures that are in our framework. I will call out here that in the performance management framework, all of our measures were calculated by all students. And very importantly, in our new accountability system, we are having most of our measures calculated by student group. And that is particularly true for pre-K only, pre-K 8, and high school. You'll hear later as we talk about our framework over time, what are the unique differences for our adult and alternative education schools. But in particular, our pre-K to 12 schools will have almost all of their measures disaggregated by student group. Another important distinction that I would like to make here is that our previous framework, the performance management framework, looked at our state assessment at approaching proficiency and proficiency. And going forward, we will be looking at the proficiency levels of our state performance state assessment system, commonly known as PARC, and quickly changing to our DC CAPE. And that you have heard us talk about 4+. That is the designation for proficiency on our state assessment. I won't go through all of the other ways that this framework is going to be different. You see the slide here, but I do want to just make a minor point to point out something regarding our adult education schools. For most of the frameworks for adult education, there are not going to be significant changes to the measures, but I did want to point out that we have included mid-level certifications in the assessment of school performance for adult education schools, because we've learned that in addition to achievement of a high-level certification, that the achievement of mid-level certification shows where adult learners have made progress and that there are some significant employability outcomes tied to that mid-level certification. And so we wanted to have a way to give credit to schools that are moving our adult learners along in that way. Next slide, please. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about where we are and where we're going and how we've approached this process a little bit differently than in the past. So I want to start by saying that we initially began this process focused on the philosophy and the technical aspects of the framework, as well as what it might look like to model that. And we did that very intentionally to make sure that we understood what were people looking for in a new accountability system, what were the things that were important to address from a technical standpoint, and then we were going to look at what the broader policy implications of that work would be. The heavy lifting is really taking place now as we develop the second part of our process, which is the charter goals policy that will outline how schools will establish and meet their goals, either using our accountability system and the frameworks within, or their individual goals. So we started by exploring the philosophical points of a framework. We did research, and that informed the data modeling. We then developed frameworks, and we're in the process of drafting our technical guide that will be before you this winter. We're continuing to refine our model and share that with stakeholders. And then we will be in the implementation phase, our pilot beginning this school year and our launch over the next school year. So what I want to just focus on here also is on what is my right, what this will look like as we implement. As I said, we had our board, this board approved our first part of our charter goals policy last year, which allowed us to have a way to measure schools who are under review and during this period of time of transition. We are working on a second part of that charter goals policy, which will address the policy implications for our new accountability system. That will be rolling out at the same time that we bring our technical guide before you in the winter. We will pilot the data that we have during this school year. We will officially launch our new accountability system in the 24-25 school year, and we will be fully into our new accountability system beginning with the 2025-26 school year. And as we're doing that, we will have opportunities to lay out the multiple pathways for schools to meet their goals till we get to the full launch of our accountability system, which will dictate us squarely moving out of our transition period. And our last slide for me before I turn it over to Carrie, want to talk a little bit about the opportunities for engagement that exist right now. I am excited that at the end of October, we will be having some learning opportunities for our school leaders to review our current models. I want to really acknowledge the active engagement that we've had from our school leaders during the accountability task force phase. They gave us lots and lots of feedback, and we heard loud and clear the multiple perspectives around our framework. My staff has really worked hard to reconcile all of the points that we made to put together models that we believe are strong, and we're looking forward to being able to share those models and allow school leaders to learn where we are in that process. We will also be doing additional stakeholder engagement between November and February, where the formal technical guide will be presented to the board for your review. We are in the process now of having critical reviews of our technical guide with targeted groups, and we plan to have an extended public comment period so that we can get robust feedback on the model, and that will be before you as the board votes. And then in the spring or summer, we will again reintroduce learning opportunities on the framework that is adopted by the board, and we'll talk about what outcomes look like against the framework and what that might mean for respective school communities. And you'll see that these are in the form of our technical guide that we will bring before you in the winter, our pilot that will begin using the data that we get from the last assessment. As you know, we're waiting on growth data from the state education agency. And once we have that, we'll be able to provide schools with the most recent data applied to our proposed accountability system. And then just to close out, we will also be bringing forward the second part of our charter goals policy with a parallel track to the technical guide, and that will guide how schools will develop their goals going forward for decisions to be made in the beginning in the 2024 through the 26 school year. So with that, I would actually like to turn it over to Carrie for her to give us some perspective on how charter board leadership can engage in this academic oversight work. Carrie?
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker Davis. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you also to your board members for your leadership and service and this incredible amount of hard work. Thank you so much to school leaders and school staff who are on this Zoom. And thank you to those of you who are, or maybe soon will be, serving on a charter school board. I am grateful to all of you in this Zoom and all who you represent for your leadership and service to the students of DC. A side note, I have to say, coincidentally, my parents are visiting me tonight, so I'm feeling so grateful for the public schools that educated me. We're sort of always our parents' children. So I have student me in my head too, as I'm speaking to you tonight. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share thoughts with you tonight about the role of charter school boards in academic oversight. There's a million things we could talk about with regard to charter schools, boards, or academic oversight, but I'm going to spend just a few minutes speaking pretty narrowly about this particular role that charter school boards have. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to hear your questions and to continue to discuss the many, many issues embedded in Dr. Walker Davis's presentation. But for tonight, I'd like to talk about governance and academic oversight in service of our shared vision. Everyone who's Dr. Walker Davis and everyone you represent, our shared vision to do everything we can to ensure that all students in the city have the opportunity to attend a great public school. I work with charter school boards here in DC, as Leah said, our chairperson said, both in DC and nationally. I was formerly at Education Board Partners. We are now Education Board Partners at Bellwether. Bellwether is a national nonprofit working to increase educational opportunities and improve educational opportunities for students furthest from opportunity. Given my experience working with many, many charter school boards, again, both here in DC and nationally, I do have some perspectives to share regarding the board's role in academic oversight. As I often say, most of governance is in the gray area. It's not very clear cut. There's not a right or a wrong. And that's where my presentation tonight sits. So I really look forward to you sharing my perspective and hearing yours. I'm very grateful to Dr. Walker Davis, to Leah, and to the board members for the opportunity to have these conversations with PCSB and others in the city's educational leadership. These are extremely hard issues at an extremely hard time in our country, our city, and in education. So I really look forward to continuing collaboration and partnership with all of you, so that I can figure out how to best support boards, because I deeply believe the longer I work with boards, the more deeply I believe that boards really matter for students. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Dr. Walker Davis said, charter school boards hold the charter. PCSB gives the charter actually to the board. And I think a lot of people think that then it eventually gets given to the school leader. That's actually not the case. The boards hold the charter in the public trust. The charter is essentially, as you said, Dr. Walker Davis, a contract between the authorizer and a group of people who come together to legally form a board, a contract to educate public school students. The goals for student success that are laid out in that charter application are the basis for that contract. And that is the basis for governance. The board that is granted that charter, that very big responsibility and the huge opportunities embedded in that charter, the board is responsible for holding the school accountable for achieving those goals laid out in the charter application for which the school was authorized. Next slide, please. Students need all of us in the sector to ensure that their schools are fulfilling the commitments in that charter by consistently and honestly monitoring their progress. And this is a wild oversimplification, especially here in DC, where we have many, many cooks in the education kitchen. But this is the heart, I think, of student success. The authorizer, a charter school board, and the school leader / school operator when it's a CMO, et cetera. And you can see this is sort of a, oops. Could you go back one? Oops. Thank you so much. This is a very simplified view of what I want to talk about today. The relationship between each board and the authorizer is around the goals in the charter, and the relationship between the board and the leader, school leader, or school leadership organization that the board hires is around monitoring student outcomes more frequently, more regularly, and with more proximity than the authorizer has. Next slide, please. I'm now going to speak as though I'm speaking to a group of charter school board members, which I know that not all of you are. Oversight and accountability, board members of charter schools, is your job. There are a lot of other things you do on this board, and there are a lot of reasons to be on a board, and there are a lot of benefits that boards bring to schools and benefits that we get from serving on boards. But at the end of the day, oversight and accountability is your job, making sure that this school is fulfilling the promises in the charter. Thus, it is my belief that student well-being and the academic achievement of students should be obvious and not obscure to board members. And that picture, that clear picture, is meant to come through the information that boards receive from their school leadership and from the authorizer. This data, information that directly and indirectly impacts how well students are doing in the school. This data should be what drives discussions and decisions on the board. It's not incidental. It's not a side issue. This is the heart of governance and should be the heart and the content of charter school board meetings, discussions, and committee meetings. Next slide, please. Also, it is really hard to understand student academic performance. The data is very complex and nuanced. Even for those of us who work in education, it takes a lot of time and attention to really suss out what's actually going on. How do different groups of students do on different measures of achievement? How about kids? Does it matter how long they've been in the school? Does it matter how is student achievement correlated with all kinds of other things? How far they live from the school? Needing extra accommodations. Understanding the gaps between groups of students is absolutely essential to understanding the full picture of how students across a school are doing. The student population is never a monolith, and the picture cannot be, which I think Dr. Walker Davis, you referenced in some of the changes in this new accountability context. Averages mask truth. So breaking down data between groups of students. However, this is what I meant. This is an example of what I meant when I said governance is in the gray area. Boards do not look at data or information at the individual student level. That is not appropriate, and that is not governance. Yet boards do need to understand the nuance that is embedded when data is presented at too high of a level. Secondly, it's complex enough to understand the picture, to have a clear picture, not an obscured picture of what is going on in a particular school. It is also essential for boards to understand your school's performance compared to other schools. That seems a little bit more clear on its face, but it's not. You can't compare your early elementary school to a high school. You can't compare a brand new school to a school that's been around a long time. I mean, you can, but those comparisons are blunt and not nuanced enough. So this level of analysis is essential to exercise sound oversight for boards to fulfill their responsibility for academic oversight. Yet most board members don't have the experience, the context, or the time to do that analysis, period. And most school leaders, frankly, don't have the time or the capacity to explain or unpack all the data and its complexity. That's actually really hard to do. And really what we want our school leaders to be spending all that time and capacity on is educating our kids, not on figuring out how to unpack all of this for a group of volunteers, most of whom are not in education. This is a very hard part of governance. Next slide, please. Even harder than that, however, let's say boards did get there and really fully understand the picture of what's going on in the school. Knowing what to do from the board seat to support improved student outcomes is even harder. This is a truly difficult question at the core of what we're doing here. How can boards, volunteer members of a community, most of whom are not educators, they are not managing the school or making management decisions, yet boards are responsible. They hold the charter. They're responsible for whether or not the school is fulfilling those promises in the charter. How can boards do this? I'm not going to talk tonight about data that you all know. The data that we see that indicates ongoing disruptions and lack of significant progress on many dimensions. Students need support. Students need all of us to come together to figure out how we can address the many complexities and challenges of these times and embrace opportunities to better support students. How can boards help specifically? Next slide, please. Okay, first, I think in my experience, most boards aren't super well organized to do this, fulfill this function, to monitor student success. Here are some headlines that I think boards that are looking to organize around this accountability responsibility. First of all, we have to have people on every board who deeply understand student data. Whoever I'm speaking to tonight who does, call me. We'd love to help you find a board that needs you. It's just like we would never expect to have a charter school board that doesn't have people with deep finance experience who can really understand all the data and information and analyze that data to understand financial performance and exercise oversight. Similarly, we really can't expect the same in terms of having people with education expertise. I will say, just like finance, I mean, there's a big difference between somebody who is a retired accountant and somebody who monitors the global investment markets and somebody who ran a small business and did all the finances. Those people all have finance experience. It's very different. Same with education, right? People have many, many, many different kinds of education, many of which can add a lot of value. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the person who understands the data that your board and your leader are working with. So first is who's on the board. Second is being a goal-driven board. Together with the school leader, driven by the school leader, not by the The board needs to understand what are the goals for student success each year. These need to be set at the beginning of the year. These goals should be clear, ambitious, and measurable. SMART, it's my way of saying smart. And these goals, the annual goals for student success, must be aligned with the mission and the charter, the accountability requirements of the authorizer, which we just discussed, and the strategic plan of the school, which is meant to be a longer-term blueprint that guides annual goal setting. Here's where we want to be in 5 years. Here's where we need to be each year. So these goals are not out of thin air. They are grounded in the context. Third, cannot say enough about the importance of a strong academic committee. Having a strong, involved, engaged academic committee does not mean second guessing, micromanaging, going over the head or behind the back of the school leader and the professional educators in the school, period. Not having a strong, engaged academic committee, in my opinion, means that the board is most likely not doing its job to exercise academic oversight. This is a very short, high-level overview of how I think academic committees should work. The committee and school leadership, ideally the school leader and the chief academic officer, work together to decide what data the board will review to monitor progress towards those goals. Like I just said, that's really hard. Boards cannot see all the data. First of all, not all of that is appropriate for the governing board. And second of all, there's too much of it. The art and science of narrowing the data that school leadership will provide to boards is super, super hard. I think we in the sector need to be doing more to help all of you in schools. And I hope to be able to do that here with my colleagues at Bellwether who have expertise in policy evaluation and school leadership. Okay, so I'm saying that like it's easy, but it's not. Decide what data the board will review. The academic committee should meet regularly. I actually don't think regularly has to mean like second Tuesday of every month. Regularly means meeting consistently, driven by when that data is available. If none of that data has come out since your last meeting, don't meet. But now next month, when there's a lot of data, we might need a 90-minute meeting, not a 45-minute meeting. So form has to follow function. Set a cadence for your committee meeting based on when that data is available. And third, leadership staff, CEO or executive director, and the chief academic officer bring analysis and key questions to the committee. These are not just shows, right? It's not just reporting out. I mean, that we need some of that so that the committee members understand enough to have helpful conversation. But ideally, time that school leaders and leadership staff spend in committee meetings is time that is actually helping them do their job better. It's not time taking them away from their job, which is what most staff report committee meetings feel like, and often board meetings too. So that's the committee. Finally, the full board is responsible for the academic performance of the school, not just the committee. What does that look like? The academic committee shares analysis, not just reporting. And again, that's hard. That's really a hard balance to strike and takes some work to figure out the right way to bring this data to the full board. But the academic committee shares analysis and progress to goals, either monthly or quarterly. Importantly, it is essential that the academic committee presents the data over time, multi-year averages, patterns, and trends over time. Presenting data as a snapshot, first of all, board members don't always follow the thread from year to year. So always highlighting the trends over time is much more, leads boards to much more sound oversight than a series of snapshots. And then finally, the full board needs to be trained, because remember, the whole board doesn't have experience in student data. That's just one or two or a small number of people. That training can take lots of different forms, and we can talk more about that. There are actually a lot of experts in the city working in really excellent nonprofits who come and speak to boards to help train boards so that the burden doesn't fall on the shoulders of the school leader. Next slide, please. Now a couple of less tactical and more strategic, I hope, thoughts about the role of boards in academic oversight. First of all, it is very, very important for boards to be paying attention, which I don't say lightly. In this case, attention to some extent means making sure that you're looking at the same data over time about the same groups of students broken down the same way. That allows boards to not get mired in the day-to-day, to look for patterns and trends that can help boards not only exercise oversight, but offer strategic thought partnership as requested by school leadership staff. Number two, the academic data doesn't come in a vacuum. It's important to map that data to decisions that the school has made about policy, structure, budget, so that you know what happens, you know which changes and which decisions are working, are succeeding in improving student opportunities and outcomes. So don't look at the data. None of the data that board review should be in a vacuum. Academic data, budget data, they all are related with a really healthy, robust committee structure. That's what board meetings can be for, to show how the data is intertwined and interrelated. Thirdly, when I talked about, there are resources out here in the city, some offered by PCSB, some offered by Empower K-12 and other organizations that help boards understand both how to analyze the data in your own school, but specifically also benchmarking against other schools, which, as I said earlier, is essential. So there are people who can help. I don't want to see every board have to recreate this. I would love to connect you, and many of us out here are happy to come to board meetings to help explain this. Again, that's a way to take the burden off of the school leader and also give boards a comparative view that's hard to get when you're focused only on your school. Something we all know, but I don't want to not talk about academic without saying specifically, while PARC, CAPE, and specific academic data is essential, that is necessary but not sufficient to understand student success. So I encourage boards through the academic committee to agree on a scorecard. That's not a great word. It's better than dashboard, but it's not great. At the beginning of each year. So there are many, many dimensions of what's happening in a school that boards can measure that are, of course, directly related to student achievement. I've listed a few of them here: teacher retention, attendance rate, parent satisfaction, teacher diversity. But again, boards can't see all the data. So aligning on what is most important. And I would encourage boards to work with school leadership staff to look for those leading indicators. Don't wait until next fall. That's a lagging indicator. It's important. We have to know that. But the goal is support along the way and then accountability. What leading indicators can boards look at? Next slide, please. Okay, last few. Listen, ask good questions. Make sure they're good by asking the school leader and leadership staff if they're good, if they're helpful. Are these questions, is this line of discussion, is this way of spending time useful to you? Are we helping you do your job? What might be more helpful? Seek outside help when you need it. I already talked about that. It is really easy to get pretty mired in the status quo without even realizing we do it. So I ask boards to remember that these are extraordinary times. Extraordinarily wonderful things are happening in every school in the city all the time. And the overall picture is challenging and difficult. Rise up, boards. Don't shy away from all of that, the good, the hard. And remember that the future of your school, the goals in the charter are constant. The strategy for how to achieve them is not. And it's really important to think about a future for each school that might look different from what it looks like now in order to best support student success. Anchor on that. Anchor on the goals in the charter. Anchor on student success. Anchor in the mission as you, the board, think about the strategy to get there. Most of the students in this city need very significant and urgent support. They need boards to do more and to do better, to learn how to support them. And I will end by saying one more thing about support. The other people who really need your support, board members, are the people who are leading your school, the person who is leading your school. And I implore you, boards, to think about big support and little support. Are you celebrating and recognizing progress in public and private ways? Are you providing a thoughtful, helpful evaluation and feedback to support your leaders' growth and development? Are you making compensation decisions in a timely way so your leader actually knows what they're getting paid? Are you paying your leader fairly and equitably? Are you remembering their birthday, their child's birthday? Are you asking if they had a good weekend? Hey, I think this was probably a really hard week for you. How are you doing? Sending flowers. The human side of everything we're talking about here, we talked a lot about data tonight. There are students behind every data point, and there are teachers and school leaders running every school. They need you too. They need your support too in all the ways. With that, I'm going to turn the mic back over to, I think, our chairperson to see if we have time for discussion and questions. Thank you again so much for this opportunity. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you all for your leadership and service on behalf of students.
I want to begin with thank you very, very much for this presentation, Carrie, and Dr. Walker Davis for yours. Before that, I'd like to open this up for questions, and I may kick it off first, if I may. Dr. Walker Davis, can you share with us how, and actually now I see, I also want to welcome our secretary, Shakura Adamafanian, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Dr. Walker Davis, can you share with us how PCSB currently engages LEA boards in charter school oversight in general, and specifically with respect to revisions in the accountability system?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Chair Cruzy. It is true that PCSB staff have regular communication with the EDs and heads of schools and many of the sort of key leads in the school around school operations and programming. But it's important to note that the LEA board members are included on all formal communications from PCSB. Typically, the board chair receives all of the updates about school performance. But with our school review reports and many other like major reports, our LEA dashboard that provides all of the data prior to a review or renewal, that goes to the entire board. We frequently also communicate with respective board officers or committee chairs, depending on if it's academic data or specific financial or operations related communications. Those may be targeted in addition to the board chair to another respective board officer who has oversight or purview on those things. I'll also name that in the past, PCSB staff have hosted trainings for board members, have attended academic or other committee meetings to share data, have participated and partnered with some of the agencies referenced by Carrie to present our prior performance management framework. And then, as you know, Chair Cruzy and other board members, we have a practice where if there are additional inquiries that we want to make with a school, or if there are community complaints that rise to the level of concern, we may have effective organizational meetings, either with members of our board and some members of the other board, or with staff, just so that we could get at the heart of what's going on there. With respect to the revised accountability system, earlier this summer, DCPCSB and Carrie Irving here hosted a specific session for board members on the revised accountability framework, similar in nature to what we presented here. And we plan to host additional board-specific sessions as we roll out this framework over time. I think it's very important that we do share this specifically with the school leaders who are going to be wrestling with the day-to-day calculations, et cetera. But for all of the reasons that Carrie mentioned, a very targeted conversation around what do these models look like, and what are the data that's going to be produced from our accountability frameworks, so that boards could wrestle with where that fits into all of the information that is in front of them. And we have informed our schools communities about this board meeting, and we will send out a very targeted communication to board members with the video of this meeting, so that they could also see the dialogue that we've had here, in addition to some of the sessions that we'll roll out over time. So I'll stop there and see if you have other questions about what we have done so far and what we plan to do.
Okay, thank you for that. We have time for just one more question. I understand we've got next part of our presentation and our speaker has limited time. There's so much to cover here. Can I invite one more question from a fellow board member?
I don't have any questions, but I do just want to thank you, Carrie, for being here, and definitely encourage you to coordinate with the staff about how as many trainings as we can do as possible for boards, just so that they understand the framework itself, even if that means as we're going through and getting stakeholder perspective. I know the staff has pretty much, done a lot of that work, but in terms of engaging the boards and maybe getting their feedback, any coordination you can provide, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you so much, Chantel. I would love to. And I would, Dr. Walker Davis and all of you, I will do this and work with you and present with you and talk to board members with you any day of the week, anytime. I really believe in the leadership of this board. I really believe in boards, and I really believe in charters in DC, especially single site charters. And I think they do need help with all of this. And so I would be really honored to continue this collaboration, as I said earlier. And thank you, Chantel, for the vote of confidence that this training can be this kind of training and support can be helpful.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to thank you, Dr. Walker Davis and Carrie Irvin, and I would now like to welcome Michelle Ashton, founder and CEO of Digital Pioneers Academy. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us this evening to share with us insight on how this school year is going.
Well, thank you. And I did have perfect. There we are. Got to always start with the kiddos. Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. Good to see you in Zoom and in person just a couple of weeks ago. And to the board members and the staff, thank you so much for allowing me the time to just share and reflect on the start of this school year. It's always important for me to start with our scholars, but also to start with our mission, which is to develop the next generation of innovators. We really want our scholars to be a part of creating, solving complex problems. And because of that, I always want to remind our team and our staff and our community that we're unapologetic college prep, computer science, and really committed to serving all of our students. But as you have mentioned, this start of this school year it's actually been good, but I think it's tough given our whole last year. And so I'll go to the next slide because I get asked a lot, like, how are you doing? How is our community doing based on last year? And I always say we have to look at our values. Our values have what have founded us, what drive us. And the reality is that our students are not okay. Our team is not okay. Quite honestly, I am not okay, but we are trying to find the bright spots each day. And this start of the school year has been tough. I think very typical new school year tough, but I'm also incredibly optimistic. Next slide. It's important that I share. I hesitated on sharing the pictures of our scholars, but I don't want anyone to forget, to have any misconception around what these young people look like, sound like, if I could be their voice for their families. My family's been in DC for 6 generations, and every single day I think about these scholars. And last year was unimaginable. October 31st, where Antoine Manning on the left, he was a tremendous athlete and was working really hard, but he was shot 22 times outside of his family's house in front of his mom. Jakai on the bottom right. Jakai was a founding student. He was the prom king, and he was shot while going to a football game 2 days after Thanksgiving. This is DeMarcos on the left. He and his cousin Kevo were shot on Father's Day, but that is DeMarcos when he achieved his MAP growth goals at the end of last year, and he was incredibly excited. And then the top right is Jalen Osborne, who was murdered on June 27th. And that was him celebrating his 8th grade promotion Really, really excited for high school. And then Keenan Anderson, who was our teacher, who was killed at the hands of the Los Angeles Police Department. I have to say their names and tell their stories to really make it real, because it is real for our community and it's real for our families every single day. But you can go to the next slide. What I want everyone also to understand is that they should be here. And they are five beautiful souls that absolutely should be here, driving me crazy, asking me for Uber Eats, driving all the teachers crazy, but they should be here. And we have to do something about this. Would you go to the next slide? And we have to do something about this because at the bottom row there, you'll see that all their siblings are still with us. They are in middle school. They have cousins, aunts who are still coming to school every single day, trying to make sense of it all. But we are their community. We have the known, loved, respected community. And so I'm sharing this because it isn't just the loss of those 4 or 5 beautiful souls, but their families are still with us. The scholars are still with us. And the impact goes really, really deep. And so you can go to the next slide. Because I wanted just to share that this is the team that turned darkness into light. This is a team that showed up. At DPA, we talk about our values. One of them is optimism, but that also means acknowledging brutal facts. And the brutal facts are that our city, the violence is not okay. Our city is in crisis. And I share that, and I say that because I am in no way pointing fingers, but we have to do something about this. We have to address the reality that it's not safe for kids to walk and go to school and just be kids in DC right now. And we really do have to come together. And what I hope, and you can go to the next slide, is that we could come together as a whole city, and that we believe this is what we believe at DPA, but we believe our scholars are our present. We're not waiting for the future to get things better. That every day, that's what it means to go 1-0, has to be better. That has to be a fresh start. And at DPA, we are embracing the struggle. We know this is tough, and I was so grateful for Carrie's presentation around just honoring school leaders, because it is really, really hard. I know we have former school leaders here on the phone. You guys know this. I wish you guys had reminded me or told me something about 6 years ago, but that's a whole nother story. It's really hard, but I think I'm choosing to embrace the struggle. Our team is choosing to embrace the struggle because there are tremendous bright spots, and some I want to share. We can go to the next slide. So last year we had 72 of our 10th graders, and these are all Black students from Southeast Washington, DC, sit for the AP Computer Science exam. They didn't pass it. They have 2 more years to do it, but that is like almost 100% increase in the number of students, particularly from Ward 7 and 8, taking the AP Computer Science exam. We're really proud of that. We just recently learned that our ELA Park scores from this fall, we had tremendous growth that's 3 times more than the city's improvement over that same period. And we have 605 scholars enrolled across 2 campuses, grades 6 and 11, and we have 92 staff members. And those are some bright spots, but we still have a tremendous amount of work to do. And you can go to the next slide. I really kind of wished that I was invited, because I could be telling you about our park scores and our MAP scores, and that all of our kids were on the path to college and career, and that we were talking about innovation and artificial intelligence, and how our scholars and DC scholars were, changing the world. But I have a sneaky suspicion it's because of the last year that folks want to know, one, how we are doing, but also the reflections around the start of the school year, particularly given the environment that we are working. So what I've decided is that in order for us to achieve our 4 C's of college, career, community, I and our team has to also address the challenges related to gun violence and just the violence that's happening in our city. And so I did want to share some additional thoughts about what my experience has been this last year. You can go to the next slide. So it really starts with the numbers up top where it says 25, 580, and 1. I think it's important to understand that while we've lost 5 members of our community very tragically, there are about 25 of our scholars who are directly impacted by those losses. They are siblings, best friends since 3rd grade, aunts, neighbors, have been together, essentially their whole young lives. And there are some very specific things that we need to do for those scholars that's different than the 580, which is our whole school community. And the last number is a 1, which is the whole city. I think we are not, unfortunately, by ourselves in terms of experiencing the number of tragedies. I think for our size and the concentration, it is unbelievable. But I think about our friends at Dunbar who've experienced a number of tragedies. I suspect that any of the schools who are dealing with violence and crime in the city, particularly in our youth, are experiencing this, where it's a concentrated group of scholars and families who are directly impacted. There's a broader community, and then there's the larger city's efforts. What I would say is what we have done, and I should say that many of you have visited, had brought snacks and cookies and sent letters of condolences. And that was really, really important, particularly when it was going. The city has done great in sending grief counselors every single time that there has been a tragedy. And, the city does incredibly well with that. But what I would say is that there is a lot of people who have reached out, but there's not a lot of specific, I would say, ideas, coordination, resources to specifically deal with what we've dealt with in terms of violent crimes that I did want to share about. And so here's things that we have done with the resources that we currently have, that if I could give advice and say, here's where we as a city could help one another. There's a long term, we've just got to end gun violence and youth violence in the city, and that's not going to happen overnight. However, what we need to do right now is increase summer and school year funding, particularly for high school students. I probably extend that to middle school. Scholars need to be engaged and they need to be active. And I firmly believe they should also be paid because some of our scholars are deciding whether to be active or to take a job. And I would much rather prefer that we're able to do both. They can continue learning, they could work, but they could also get paid. Second, there has to be additional funding to support schools who experience these multiple violent crimes. And if we had additional supports, it would all go towards mental health for the staff and for scholars, for the specific families, as well as activities. And my last point is really that there are a number of providers and programs that actually address the mental health, families, and activities, but there's no central place for a school like me that's pretty small relative to some of the other schools to go to get that coordination. And so it's actually pretty overwhelming. We have great partners who specifically serve the students and families in the communities that we serve, whether it's the Trigger Project or Drip Lab. There's all of these partners, but there's no real coordination across the family's mental health and specific activities for scholars that would make it easier if in fact, and hopefully no one has to experience this when you are dealing with multiple situations. And, again, I could talk about transportation, I could talk about school resource officers, but I just have to emphasize how important this is for for us as school leaders, as cities, as public officials to really do something more immediate. And I have to share because on Friday night, I got a call at 9:30 that said one of our scholars had been shot, and it's all over social media. And we're calling and reaching out, and the headline is "The scholar is fine." But for about 4 hours, I thought I was going through this again. And I was going through the playbook of who do I need to reach out to? Who do I need to call? And I know I'm not alone in that. I know that many school leaders across the city experience that time and time again. And again, this scholar was shot in the foot and in the chest and is fine. But I cannot express it enough that schools are not built to deal with situations like this. And schools have an opportunity, because we are the safe place where we can bring scholars and families together to be able to address mental health, try to do the intervention, but at the end of the day, keep scholars engaged so that they can ultimately reach their full potential. So that's me going way over. Happy to answer any questions.
Michelle, I'd like to begin by thanking you for coming here tonight, thanking you for preparing this. I know you worked with many members of your school community to prepare this, and for sharing your students and your stories. Having the memory and legacy of the scholars who lost their lives entirely too soon is heavy for all of us, but I can only imagine the burden that you and your school community and their families have experienced. And it's a really important reminder that each student impacts this 25, 580, and 1 is a really powerful framing for all of us. And I'm so grateful to hear from you tonight. I'd like to open up the floor to other board members who may have some questions for you, and I may follow up with my own.
Chairwoman Ruth, Cruzy, I'd like to start. Background. Okay. Michelle, thank you again. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing all that your school community has been through, from a former school leader to a current one. My heart goes out to you. Leadership is tough, and leadership during these trying times is even more tough, and it's lonely at the top, if you will. And so just know that my heart goes out to you as you navigate this with your school community. Just a question about violence interrupters. I know that was added to your staff, and just curious about how that is working and how this position is making a difference in your school community.
Yeah, it's really, thank you for your support. I definitely feel the love from the board. And again, send cookies or just come by, all that works. After Jalen died, I just started meeting with as many people as possible, saying like something has to be done. And was really lucky I met with City Council Trayon White, and he introduced me to an organization. It's called Brotherhood by Dejon Wilson, who's a former student athlete and college football player, who then connected me to a member of the community. And when this happened, let me take a step back. Our school has 600 kids, and we started recruiting in very specific communities: the Woodland community, the Stanton community, the community that's serving Ann Beers. And so now, 6 years later, we have all the siblings, all the families from those schools. So I suspect that 50% of our kids are literally from a 3-neighborhood trajectory. And so after we started really pulling back, like, where is the issues, where is the tension, we could square it down to like a triangle of neighborhoods. And the majority of our kids come from primarily the Woodland neighborhood, which also has specific history with the Hartford neighborhood, which then has specific history with another neighborhood. So once we started just gathering information, we identified a member of the community who was a father who has high school age kids in the city. And he just came in, and quite honestly, he's here every day, and it's the best decision we've made. And it's because he understands our kids, he understands their neighborhoods, and he helps explain to our educators kind of what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. And when in the last 2 weeks, when and this is the thing about, you know, losing our 4 kids, is it just gets played over and over again in terms of social media, whether kids are posting or whether they're antagonizing one another. It keeps coming up. And so when that happens, we can go to our, I wouldn't call him a violence interrupter, I'd call him a peacemaker, quite honestly. We can go to him, and he literally can talk to these young men, and he asks them the same 3 questions. You can't bring our friend back. And the way you honor him is by living. And then he says, what's the beef? Y'all don't have any beef. What's the problem? And literally he just boils it down that way. But then what he mostly talks about is like, you can be he really communicates to our kids that you're not outside, as the kids will say, because y'all come to school. Y'all have uniforms, y'all get Uber Eats, that you actually like coming to school. So you're not outside, you're here, you're in this safe place. Keep this school safe. We can't change things that are happening outside, but keep this school safe. And, you know, again, for 7 weeks into the school year, it's the best decision we made. And that wasn't in our budget, let's say that. But we've had to move things around to make sure that we had someone who could communicate with our kids, and also just be a liaison with me and with the leadership of the school. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I didn't say his name because I don't want no one to take him. He's mine.
Any other board members have a question?
So I think, Michelle, I want to just echo how Shakura started. I guess my question would be more around a lot of the stuff you talked about was citywide and city coordination, and really honestly goes beyond the role of an authorizer, right? And so I just, as we're in a public meeting, I just want to note that, right? Like, this really is about trying to get the city to respond to safety. And while we do have you here, not just to talk about your loss. And I look forward to the day where you can move beyond also just focusing on that, right? And I recognize that it has been very traumatic, so we don't want to underscore that. But you're running the school, you're doing the hard work, right? Like what this looks like. So one, if it in any way seemed like you were just here to talk about the loss, that's not the intent. We really want to just talk about what it means to actually run schools, and we have the opportunity to do that. And I think that's important because people don't always understand the heavy weight of that work. But when you think about specifically the charter board and the role of an authorizer, what are some of the things that are coming up for you as a school leader that we could be hopeful with, should be thinking about, as we particularly connecting it to the revised accountability framework, but also just thinking about what we could be doing as authorizers to continue to support school leaders, not just at the start of the school, but throughout?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I in no way thought it was just because of last year, because, you know, I'll come anytime you guys ask me to come. Except maybe for the review, or never mind. Anyway,
I was going to say, be careful what you say. See, this is one school leader to the next. Don't ask for too much, but please tell us what can we do?
You know, so I know school leaders have questions / concerns / serious thoughts about the accountability system. I trust that the team, the staff, and those school leaders who are on the committee are pushing, and what we're coming up with is going to be better, new, improved. So that's my assumption. And I think that continuing to over communicate around the accountability, the what, the why, and quite honestly, like listening to Carrie's presentation, I'm like, oh yeah, this all sounds great. And I was like taking screenshots. I just don't think that people, unless you're really, really deep into it, it's not front and center. And so I wouldn't underestimate the effort to over communicate what it is and what it is not, and the why of it. And I think I'm fairly engaged around it. So I think that it's just more fear, quite honestly, than actual concerns about what's in it. Is it perfect? No one's going to say it's perfect, but is it meant to help with oversight and accountability? I believe so. And so I'm excited to see that roll out. I do, if there was one wish I had is, and I think everyone needs, is like, we just need more awesome people to work in DC's charter schools and in the city. And so I think that comes from telling the good stories of what's happening in DC's charter sector, city sector. But because this is the public charter school board, I think it is incredibly important to tell the good news, tell the story, tell the bright spots that are happening time and time again, because it then attracts more people, more talent to our city and to our schools. And if I know every school leader just wants more great people, we're all looking for great people. And so right now, I think there's still a lot of myths out there. There's still a lot of like, do charters do this? I'm still very surprised about that. And so, it's still the Charter 101 in DC, not like, oh, our charter schools, public schools, like, okay, everyone gets that. But like, do you have to serve all kids? And, what happens when a kid leaves a charter school? Can they go to another charter school? There's just a lot still misinformation that I think it would be helpful for the public charter school board to see themselves as ambassadors and educators to the broader community. And I think the last thing, and this came up in a meeting I was in last week, I still, and we're a single site school that has 2 campuses, but I've been doing charter school work for 25 years. So I'm going to rely on my old experience, which is there's clearly a role for authorizers. And I think you guys are doing that very well, but there's also a clear role for support for charter schools. And I think that the coordination of support and the clarity of who to go to for what there's an opportunity there. And so while that's not you guys doing it, I think being an advocate around charter schools we're going to be the authorizer. We're going to, paint the North Star, but here's all the supports that you can go to. We're not endorsing them, but at least you know who to go to. Right now, it's literally like, okay, I got this problem. Let me go here. I got my data problem. I got my SPED problem. I got my advocacy problem. It's like, you've got to go to like 4 or 5 different organizations to navigate, like something really minor. Like, what do you do when a kid, I don't know, brings in a bag of grass to school and it's really grass, something like that. I literally have a text exchange, or I send it out to my little group friends and we respond. And if you're a new school, if you've been around, or you're a new leader at an old school, if you don't have that network, you can make some big mistakes early that then come to your attention, where parents are complaining because, a school leader didn't follow the appropriate protocol. So I think that's not your role to do that thing, but advocating for more coordination and clarity and support around some top priority items, I think would serve our city and sector well.
No, that's a very, very helpful things. Thank you. And I do just want to highlight behind the scenes, I'm very proud of our executive director that is doing a lot of that, advocating for those resources in that school support, understanding that exactly what you said, where leaders should go and the role of PCSB versus other organizations that are in the city, how we play that, and quite honestly, pushing the city to be thinking about this too on a larger scale, right? Because as the perfect example you gave, yes, children go to charters, but then children go to DCPS. At the end of the day, they're the city's children, right? And we're all impacted by what that looks. So thank you for that feedback and push for us to continue to coordinate those efforts and to honestly even be more visible about our pushes for some of those things and continuing communication. Very helpful. And my last question, you talked about it. I'm just very curious because we don't get to hear from schools all the time. You hear through the framework, through the grapevine. Do you have vacancies right now? And if so, how are you dealing with those? Teacher vacancies, staff, well, I don't even want to just say teachers, right? Because everybody in the building is a teacher. So how are you dealing with, do you have vacancies and how are you dealing with them?
Yes, we always have vacancies, particularly in special education. I had literally a teacher who was with us for 4 weeks who came from like Laurel and was commuting and said, hey, I can't commute anymore. So I'm out, like 9th grade algebra, after 4 weeks. And so we had to move things around, but that left a gap in 11th grade history. So I would say, yes, we're always hiring. So I interview, literally, I spend 30 minutes every single day doing 15-minute calls with potential candidates. So I think we adopted pretty much during the pandemic that we're always hiring. If we can find people who are mission, vision, values align and who have specific skill, that we'll find a way to bring them on board. And we've reached out to our friends, but all of our classrooms are staffed by full-time lead teachers. Yes. We don't have we have a long-term sub in a classroom. And some of our teachers who are leading long-term sub were hired to do special education, for example. And so now they're stretched thin, or they're like half day doing the special ed services. And now second half of the day, they're doing lead math or ELA instruction. So I think if I had a big wish, it would definitely be around special education and math. Those are our biggest needs. And I'm like super excited about our ELA. I'm super concerned about our math. And so we've got to find ways to close those gaps, and finding high quality math teachers is really tough. So we're trying to think through, how do we train? How do we support? How do we develop really great math teachers?
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I just wanted to have, not because I want you to promote having vacancies, but hey, this is a forum, so you never know. But to also, just so we keep our eye on the prize, that as much as we want to move the needle for children, we can't do so if we don't have qualified staff members and teachers in our buildings. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Go ahead.
Michelle, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for your presentation, and especially for your distinguishing so clearly between what are school issues and what are city issues, and for the both the specificity and the pragmatism of your recommendations. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Michelle, for all of this, for your service to DPA and your community. And board members, this concludes our formal agenda for this evening. Is there any new business?
Chair Cruzy, I'm not a board member and I don't have new business, but I did want to just thank Michelle as she departs. I had an opportunity to visit DPA a couple of weeks ago and just had a good school visit. Just wanted to name while we're here that the school culture felt really good. Students were learning, educators were actively engaged. And I just want to put that out there in the context of all of the difficult stuff that we heard, that school is happening. And I also want to acknowledge Michelle's leadership, just in terms of being that sounding board for some other school leaders, but also being willing to name where the struggles are and to seek that partnership, and to board member Wright's point, it is probably behind the scenes and folks don't see it enough, but we have a whole priority area in our strategic plan, Enduring Partnerships, which is really about connecting those dots and elevating where those partnerships are necessary, whether we're out front leading it as an authorizer or behind the scenes. And so I really do appreciate your honesty and transparency, Michelle, because I do take those things, your statements and the statements of other school leaders, into the meetings that I sit in and the tables that I sit at to elevate those opportunities. So I just wanted to say thank you before you went on with your evening, and also just what Michelle's remarks represent for other school leaders as well.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It was a great visit.
Thank you for that, Dr. Walker-Davis. And it's also a reminder for me to also extend the gratitude to the PCSB team. Ms. Shea, this was a unique board meeting tonight, and the PCSB team came together to make possible this discussion, both this part of the discussion and Carrie Irvin's presentation to LEA boards earlier. This work is incredibly important, and the work of as the authorizer includes all of these things that I articulated earlier. It enables us to have a more complete picture of the work that we do, having a presentation like this tonight. So thank you. And thank you to the staff for making this possible. Board members, if we have no other new business, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the October 16th, 2023 board meeting.
I second.
Thank you. And I will take a concluding roll call vote. Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chantel Wright,
Aye.
Shakura Adamafanian,
Aye.
and I am also an aye. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.